Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this new webinar series. Today, we are going to listen to Ian Osborne, the Director of Digital Systems KTN, who is also an active member of the G Cloud project on the progress made so far by the coalition government on the G Cloud. This is first of the new series of webinars on various topics related to scalable computing, cloud computing, and sustainable IT. We will bring you 12 to 15 webinars in autumn and early winter on interesting topics wherein you can listen to experts from various fields of the industry and academics. We are delivering this webinar using a commercial platform called GoToMeeting.com. During the webinar, you can raise your hand to seek attention, chat with us, send questions using the chat window, or you can reserve your questions till the end of the presentation, wherein we have allocated 10 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes to discuss your questions. Now, I will hand over control to Ian Osborne for the presentation.
Thank you, Mahesha, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to kick off the webinar series with a discussion about an update on where we are with the government cloud in the UK. And the government cloud is a major project being led by the Cabinet Office, looking at the way of improving, I guess, developing new infrastructure, new platforms, new services for supporting the role of government in delivering services to the citizen. It encompasses central government primarily, but with the thought process of supporting local government too. So just a quick word about me for those of you who are not aware of the work of the KTN. I work for Intellect, the High-Tech Trade Association based here in London, but I've been working for 5 years on knowledge transfer networks. Next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what the work we do. It's funded by the government through the Technology Strategy Board, and it's an IT-focused knowledge transfer network looking at areas like cybersecurity through our colleagues at Kinetic, and location and timing through our colleagues at MPL, and our own work, Mahesha and myself, looking at scalable computing, looking at scalability, looking at IT as a service, and distributed computing in general. And I guess our interest is in capitalizing on the massive amount of processing capability we now have in our data centers and even on the desktop, and trying to make sure we can figure out how we can get the best of that. So we're focused on cloud, utility computing, sustainability, and distributed applications and services. And since October last year, I've been working on the G Cloud. I led the initiative to specify the application store, and you'll hear more about that in a moment. On the KTN itself, the next slide gives a little bit more about knowledge transfer networks. The idea is that these are channels for knowledge exchange and also helping businesses find access to funding available. We run a large number of competitions at the Technology Strategy Board. There are also a large number of competitions for R&D support from Europe and elsewhere, and we try and give people access to that. So I was at such an event yesterday in Cardiff. And we try and interact with other networks, both KTNs and other professional networks, trade associations and so on. And I like to think that we have good people in our KTNs who understand and act as gatekeepers in those areas of speciality. And our agendas are set by leaders in the key industry sectors that we're seeking to represent. So I have an advisory board that basically helps me set priorities on the work I do, and including my colleagues in the Technology Strategy Board itself. So we hope to provide a key course of knowledge and experience to support your needs for business innovation. Now, onto the task at hand. About 5 years ago, I got hold of this slide from colleagues in the Open Grid Forum world, and I rather liked it. And I rather like the idea of moving from the old world of static data centers full of static silos sized for a few thousand users that would allow us to run an application. You'd have to log on independently and run maybe all day or maybe for a period of a day, to a new world where we gain access to a whole plethora of services from our window onto the internet, as it were. And and that behind these services there's a dynamic, shared and very much a virtual environment there. In fact, some businesses claim not to run with any form of physical data center anymore, just virtual services. Everything's automated and everything is a service. And not long ago, I used to work for Hewlett-Packard. The Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Technology Officer, Shane Roberson, announced that software as a service is just the tip of the iceberg. We're moving to a future state where everything will be delivered to you as a service. And other people like Nick Carr have come up with the analogy of the electricity grid basically replacing our own individual power stations. And I suppose there's some thought about moving to a utility here, and there are some certain comparisons. But I guess the most interesting part of all this is building infrastructures that allow us to deliver services that allow you to get your work done or your business done, whatever it is, and to be able to operate in a very efficient world, not worrying about IT, but worrying about what services you use. In the cloud model, what we see is a large, it isn't confusion, a large number of people defining cloud for whatever reason that they like, and I always make the point that it's a good idea to start off with a definition of cloud. Mine comes from the National Institute of Science and Technology in the US, and they've talked about software as a service, which is Salesforce.com. You basically buy a license or a seat at Salesforce.com. They keep all your data in the cloud. They run the application in one single multi-tenanted instance of that somewhere in the world, and you basically store your data with them, possibly take a backup copy yourself, but you're running their software over the internet in order to get your work done. Platform as a service, a lot of discussion recently about platforms, but one way of defining a platform is Amazon.com's platform for creating websites for e-commerce. Another one is the Apple iPhone app or the Apple Apps platform, which allows you to build applications for the iPhone very efficiently. There are many of those sorts of things, but I think there's a huge opportunity there for productivity in giving you access to tools that help you assemble applications rather than have to write them from scratch. And the good news about platform as a service is that the offerer often gives you the opportunity to be able to allow you to develop your own applications quickly and deliver them via a big infrastructure already. And then finally, infrastructure as a service, where everyone talks about Amazon and EC2 and the S3 for storage. There are, again, a wide range of people offering such services out there in the world, and I think these are very good options for you if you want to try out something. You want to be able to run a prototype service, for example. You can easily acquire the services you need. You only pay for the ones you use for as long as you use them, and this is a very powerful model in this day and age for getting hold of compute and resources. So those are the three big areas of interest. What goes with that is definition of what a cloud is, and we have, I guess, on this slide from the same national source of definition, the idea of a private cloud operated solely for an organization within a firewall. You'll get some people saying that's not a cloud, but it doesn't much matter if it's your way of sourcing and resourcing. That works fine. The public cloud is what happens when you go to Amazon or you go to other service providers and you basically procure resources over the internet. That's a powerful model. A lot of people thinking now about going out and buying email services, for example, rather than actually running email in-house. And I think there's a lot of good reasons for doing that. A hybrid cloud is when you use both private and public, and obviously if you have a private cloud, so you've showed your resources, but you have big peaks of demand once or twice a year, you might want to go into the public cloud to get resources to cover that requirement, and a hybrid cloud would be a way of describing that. And a community cloud is where you might share resources. An example given to me recently was a major borough in the UK interested in sharing its resources with the local university, with the local schools, the local hospitals, as well as the council services to have one shared environment for citizens in that area. So that could be an example of community cloud. Other examples include suppliers to a large motor manufacturer using the motor manufacturer's processing power for simulation and modeling, for example, as you design new parts of a car. So those are examples of services and cloud. I'm going to talk now about how the government has seen this and where its thought processes are coming from. And I guess the story starts over a year ago when John Suffolk, the government CIO, was starting to be interested in the potential for cloud to change the way government computing was done. And this came to a head, I guess, in the government ICT strategy. It was published by the Cabinet Office on 27th of January this year. And while it was published before the election, this is still the current ICT strategy. And I'll make some comments at the end about how current it is. But nevertheless, it's a viable strategy. And you'll see at the heart of the slide is the G-Cloud idea. So what is G-Cloud? And why G-Cloud? I think I'll start with why. We have a world now, I think I saw data the other day that implied that 60% of citizens in the UK, about 60% of 60 million, are in a position where they can actually go online to find out information. And this has changed the way we look at the world, and this is widespread across all businesses, of course. Suddenly we have a situation where people will use their browsers to access services at any time, day or night, and expect it to work like that. We expect Amazon to take our order and deliver our presents in time for Christmas. That's a huge peak of demand for them. Government is looking at the same sorts of needs, and it published a swine flu database last year, immediately overwhelmed by millions of users seeking to gain advice. We're no longer in a position where we can use the old silo mentality of sizing a system in order to provide capacity, because that capacity is often rapidly overwhelmed. So we need to think differently about how we deliver infrastructures. When you look at government policy, and although this was under the last administration, a lot of these things are still very current. The idea of giving Britain a digital infrastructure that allows us to access services, the idea of improving operational excellence or productivity improvement, the idea of delivering government services online, and the idea of reducing carbon emissions are all very valid objectives for any organisation in this day and age, government notwithstanding. But government has a huge chance here to show leadership in the area of green ICT as well. And so the enablers are basically to take ideas from the global ICT industry, and cloud's the biggest idea that we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years, and work out how to apply these ideas in the delivery of government services. And government is different to many enterprises, not least of which it doesn't have a profit motive, but it does have a desire to improve efficiency, and it does have a desire to deliver a good value for money. So the challenge is, though, it often is highly regulated, literally, in that there are laws that mandate certain behaviours. And so balancing this act in government is a challenge. But the cloud does seem to present some really good opportunities. So let me talk a little bit more about that. In a nutshell, the government cloud project has 3 components. The G-Cloud, which is like an infrastructure as a service offering, where there's an infrastructure fabric across government that can be potentially shared, at least in part, and provide processing power on demand. So when we submit our tax returns quarter to midnight on 31st of January, there's enough processing power available to scale out to meet demand. The application store, which is the interface for users to government services, I'll talk more about that in a moment, and also consolidation of data centers to provide the underlying infrastructure for the G-Cloud itself. If I look at each, the overall vision for the G-Cloud, it's a complicated picture, which will emerge on your screen in just a moment, that talks about public sector network at its heart, the bottom layer. We've got a service management layer. Service management in large-scale systems becomes more and more complicated when you have large volumes of services to be assured and to be scheduled and run. So this is not something that can be ignored. When you look at Amazon and Google running, you are looking at extraordinarily sophisticated managed services being delivered to you, with very defined architectures and very well thought through models of operation underpinning them. So this is not just a lob it in the middle and make it work activity. We've got consolidated data centers to the next level, and then we have a range of services we provide. Shared services, email, office apps, ERP, enterprise resource planning, HR systems, voice over IP. These sorts of services can be provided across a number of departments. Cloud platform services, that is if you want to gain access to resources, as well as hosting infrastructure as well, and of course the provisioning and billing mechanisms that go with them. The provisioning, by the way, I waved my hand over earlier on. If you actually use a private cloud and burst into a public cloud, you need